presentation. Continue.
Hello everyone and welcome to our online Parent Council meeting. I'm Sarah Scott, Chair of James Gillespie's High School Parent Council. Thank you for joining us this evening. To start, can I make the usual apologies for any technical issues we might have during the meeting? For example, if you're having problems joining us or hearing us, or if one of the presenters' Wi-Fi freezes, we ask for your patience. We're using Microsoft Teams for the meeting because it's the system approved by Edinburgh Council, but it's not as interactive as some systems, and the only people who can be heard are the presenters. Everyone else attending can write questions via the Q&A panel, but can't be heard. The meeting is being recorded and it will be put online for those who can't make it this evening, or if you need to leave at any point, or if you want to rewatch any part of it. But that being the case, please don't share any personal information that shouldn't be aired publicly. We normally aim for the meetings to last about an hour, although we sometimes overrun that a little. As I mentioned, we can only take questions via the Q&A panel. The questions will be published for everyone to see by our parent moderators this evening. So if you'd like your question to say private, please say so when you type it in. And if you see a question on the Q&A that is similar to one that you want to ask, could you like that question rather than ask a repeat? That will be very helpful in making sure we can manage the questions as efficiently as possible. And finally, can I also ask that all questions and comments are expressed in an appropriately courteous way? All the questions will be gathered up at the end and posted together with answers on the Parent Council website. We will try to handle this as quickly as possible, but if there are a lot of questions, it can take time for the school to get written answers for them all. So if you have urgent issues or queries, please don't wait, but get in touch directly with the school or with the Parent Council. So tonight the meeting is going to run like this. Firstly, I will give an update on Parent Council activities. This will be followed by Eliot Ambrose, our Active Schools Coordinator, who will be talking about the Active Schools programme. Then we will hear from our head teacher, Dolan Macdonald, who will give his normal report on the school. And after that, we'll move on to a presentation from Ashling Dolan, Acting Curriculum Leader for Maths, who will be presenting on the Maths curriculum. And then we will have the Q&A. So starting with Parent Council work. Those who were at the last Parent Council meeting in January will perhaps recall that there was a query by a parent about whether parents' evenings would continue to be run online even when we are able to meet again in person. And we said then that we would work with the school to run a survey of parents on that issue. I just wanted to let you know that work on this is underway and the survey should be launched shortly and will run over Easter. So please look out for notification of that and let us have your views. I also announced last time that we were to be holding a meeting with the intention of re-establishing an events and fundraising group. That meeting did take place on 10th February, where a small but enthusiastic group came together. Sadly, it wouldn't be a big enough group to run events, but what we propose to do is to send out a quick questionnaire with some of the suggestions for events that the group have come up with to see whether people think these are good ideas, which it would be useful to pursue, and also to look for support in organising and running them. It will be great to be able to hold in-person events again, but to run anything like that needs people. So once again, please look out for the questionnaire and consider whether you would be able to help. Since the last Parent Council meeting, I've attended 2 of the normal meetings between Edinburgh Council and Parent Councils, the North East South East Locality meeting and the Consultative Committee with Parents, or CCWP, which councillors also attend. A variety of issues were raised and presentations made on things like active schools, the council strategy on school attendance, an update on SQA plans for exams this year, and an update on council figures on pathways, which is basically school leaver destinations. We have posted the presentations on the Parent Council website, and for the CCWP there's also a link to the recording of the meeting, so please have a look. If you have any questions or want any more information about what was discussed in the meetings, please do get in touch. Also, as mentioned at the last Parent Council meeting, the Council has set up a new group to liaise between parents and parent councils on the one hand and council officers on the other for parents of children with additional support needs in mainstream schools. And the Council asked all parent councils to nominate a representative, and we have nominated Laura Bird, who's a member of the Parent Council. This is in addition to the 4 locality groups for parent councils in the North East, South East, North East and South West of Edinburgh, as well as a citywide group for special schools, all of which feed into the CCWP. The draft minutes of the latest meeting of the ASN group are posted on the Parent Council website. If you're a parent of a child covered by this new group and you want to raise any issues with the council, or you want further information on the group, please do get in touch with the Parent Council so we can take that forward. We will be reporting back on the meetings with the council as they happen, but we have found that these types of meetings are a good way for information to be disseminated by the council to parents, and very importantly for parents to bring up issues with them. It is also an opportunity to hear about experiences in other schools and to make common cause with other school representatives, so we hope that this will also be the case for this new group. At the last Parent Council meeting, it was also reported that the council had decided in January not to go ahead with going forward with a statutory consultation on a new GME high school at that point, but instead to consider the issue again at the Education Committee meeting on 1st of March. At that meeting, a further decision was taken to defer the issue, partly because there was no consensus on the site for the school, and also because there are about to be council elections in May, so there won't be time to run the consultation before then. So work will restart in the summer when a new council is in place. What this means is that the date of 2025, which the council have planned on for a new GME high school, will not be met, as there won't be time to run the consultation and construct a school by then. In fact, that would also potentially have been the case under the draft statutory consultation the council had prepared in January, which envisaged dates between 2025 and 2027 for a new school, and that without there being any construction delays. The council's plan, which has been in place for a number of years now, is to provide space at Gillespie's and to establish the foundations of a new GME school using the Darach building on Upper Gilmore Place, which is being refurbished to be used as an annex for the school. And this was originally to have been finished for August 2021, but as we all know, the construction work was delayed because of COVID and is now scheduled to be ready for August this year. According to the council's estates manager, on the basis of the projections they have, that will provide extra space for the school until 2025, after which time another solution needs to be found until a transfer of GME to a new school is made. At the 1st of March meeting, one of the things council officers did in their update was to set out the range of options they have when capacity is an issue at a school, and this includes additional accommodation, internal reconfiguration of space, adaptation of the timetable, a catchment review and a placement policy. They also confirmed this is not something they were looking at immediately and that the focus on the short term is getting the Darach up and running. They did not put forward any preferred option. Obviously, changing catchment arrangements or making placement policies for what will be an interim period before a GME school is in place would be disruptive, politically difficult, and I suspect strongly opposed. Once a new council is in place and we know who is on the Education Committee, we'll be making early and robust arguments for this to be dealt with and for additional appropriate accommodation to be provided to support the whole school. And we have seen recently that this is possible with the use of the Children First building right beside the school in the period when the Darach hasn't been available. Turning now to Parent Council finances, on behalf of the Parent Council Treasurer, Ros Ingle, I'd like to let you know the following. The balance of the Parent Council bank account on 19th March was £1,635.88, and the third quarterly easy fundraising payment of the school year of £100.77 was paid in on 18th February. We have set up an additional Teams account to help with the running of meetings like this by the Parent Council, and that costs an additional £7.20 a month, for which we can draw on the grant from Edinburgh Council for Parent Councils to help with the administration of meetings. Our small sums fund application process was run in September 2021 in conjunction with the JGHS Trust, who funded some of the bids. And after this, for the first time ever, we had not spent all of the surplus funds from the school year 2021, with £1,600 remaining. We therefore, ran a second supplementary round of applications in February to ensure that the school was able to benefit from the money we had raised. And on this occasion, we received bids to a higher total value than available funds, but we were able to fund or to partly fund bids to a total of £1,598.48. The applications and the breakdown of allocations are available on the Parent Council website, and awards included money to help purchase basketball strips, funding for learning resources for modern languages and maths, a magazine subscription, and a variety of other things. We have paid that money over to the school via cheque for £1,516.85, with a balance of £81.63 being made up by the remainder of parent pay funds raised in 2021. Every year we get very positive feedback from teaching staff about how useful these awards are in supporting their work in the school. We also hope to meet all of the bids when that is possible. It is only through the generosity of parents that we're able to make this support available to the school. So if you're able and you're in parent pay to deal with something else, please consider making a donation to the Parent Council Fund. Alternatively, you can also support the Parent Council fundraising at no cost to yourself through easy fundraising, which makes a donation to your chosen fund when you shop online. We hope that next year our main fundraising activities, particularly refreshments at school events, will be possible again. In the meantime, we hope that parents can continue to support our work supporting the school, as you have so generously done over the last 2 years. You can find further information on all of this on the Parent Council website under fundraising. And just to remind you, the website is jghsparentcouncil.org, and you can also get to the website via the Parents tab in the school's own website. That's all from my update. I don't know if anyone else speaking tonight was planning on mentioning this, but today we are almost exactly 2 years from the date when the first lockdown happened and how schools were run was changed radically. To be honest, I'm not quite sure what to say about that, but we all hope, obviously, that things will continue to become more normal in schools over the next few months. However, from the Parent Council point of view, I'm fairly sure I wouldn't be talking to, I think it's 61 people if I were in the school library for this meeting. So we've obviously, access has been improved in some ways by holding meetings online. And that's something we'd like to take forward in the future. But at the moment, I'd like to thank again all the school staff and others like Eliot this evening who have come to Parent Council meetings over the last couple of years, which has really helped to keep parents in touch with the school and with school activities. And Laura, I will now pass on to Eliot, who's going to give an update on active schools at Gillespie's. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the introduction. I'm just going to put the presentation up and hopefully everybody can see that. So good evening, everybody. My name's Eliot. I'm the Active Schools Coordinator. Just a 5-minute update from me this evening on celebrations. We've had lots of sporting success this year, not just in terms of actual winning stuff, but just also in terms of increased participation and a great number of clubs happening. Challenges within that, obviously, rising costs and a need for donations and volunteering. An invitation for you to get in the mix for the coming academic year, which we're starting to plan ahead for now. So to begin with celebrations, tasty celebrations. This is some of our wonderful pupils. A couple of 3 weeks ago, went with Mr. Sivright to a cross-country athletics meet and came back with a trophy and lots of really good results. And it's something that we've really been celebrating this year. We've had victories in tournaments with the girls football team in particular doing very well. We've had individual accolades. There was a young lad captained Edinburgh Rugby under-18s and has had international selections for athletics, an upcoming Scottish schools international meeting. We've had teams reaching the finals. We've got the S1 basketball boys going to the finals next week, and as mentioned, we've had record participation numbers, which is amazing considering coming out of COVID. I think it speaks volumes to how important and crucial extracurricular sport and physical activity is to the whole life of the school, really. However, whilst we have all these celebrations, they do cost money. And I just wanted to mention again this evening, just a few of the costs involved with extracurricular sport and physical activity. So transport costs, obviously it looks like Mr. Macdonald's kindly agreed to drive the bus to the event on this occasion. And there's me back trying to sit at the back of the bus with the cool kids. But for example, I mentioned the S1 boys are in the finals next week. That's in Dundee, and transport costs for attending events can be anywhere between £100 to £400. So that's what we're looking at to bus kids to and from events. And obviously it's great when we have parent volunteers that go with the kids, but in the event that we can't release a staff member or get parent volunteers, sometimes we have to pay coaches, non-driving coaches, whistle coaches, sports coaches, I should say, rather than transport coaches as well to go along. So that's a big one, is transport costs. Obviously, on the back of the the success at the athletics event, we looked into getting some running jerseys for the Gillespie's kids because we realised we didn't have kit, and again, to kit us out for the athletics events, we looked into that, and again, that's 300 quid for some kits for the athletics. And then once you get to the event, you've got your kit, you've got your bus there. Then there's obviously competition and officiating costs, and our friend here, 1990s referee Pierluigi Collina, costs approximately £25 per match, bearing in mind that there's 4 or 5 school football teams playing on a Saturday morning, so that's 4 or 5 times £25, and the same for basketball and other sports as well. So these costs do mount up, and I guess I just wanted to give you a rundown of where your donations go, and we're really grateful for all the donations we've received so far. But it is, again, a plea from me to please support if you can. Suggested previously that £15 to £30 per term would be a really good donation. And if there's regular competitions that you know your children are competing in for teams that involve, refereeing costs and transport costs, as we've discussed, then a little bit more would be really helpful. We are trying this system again, this year, that the donation system, because we do believe it's more equitable. We don't want finance to be a barrier. So please, this isn't, me asking. It is me asking for money, but it's not me asking for money if it's not there. Please only support if you can, and every little really does help and is gratefully received and goes towards the stuff that I talked about at the top there. So do get in the mix. The Gillespie's sport and physical activity, it really is a mix. I've put a cake mix picture up here to illustrate that there's lots of ingredients. The PE department are massively committed. Every single member of the PE department is involved, either leading a club or organising competitions as a contact point for the young people. We've got community sports hub clubs involved that give their time as well, and their coaching and their expertise. I work closely with the finance team, and Mr. Macdonald is massively supportive, and we have parent and teacher volunteers as well who give up their time, as well as senior pupils who are on our leadership academy courses and our young leaders and sports leaders courses. So it really is a mix, and I just want to say again, please do get in the mix, please do get involved. It's this time of year I'm looking ahead to the next academic year to try and find coaches and volunteers to lead the clubs. And just again, a request from me that if you're keen to get involved with volunteering, you'll get free training, you'll get ongoing support from me, and most of all, it's really great fun being involved in sport, and won't chuck you in at the deep end. You do get that training and support. So if you're interested in volunteering, please do get in touch with me. It's great fun. And that's really what makes the Tasty Gillespie's cake, is a mixture of volunteers and donations really enables us to bake up a special cake of Gillespie's sport and physical activity that all the pupils can enjoy. So if there are any questions, please do pop them in the Q&A, and I think we'll come back to them at the end. And I believe, Laura, I'm handing over to Donald. Thanks everybody for listening.
Hello everyone and good evening. Let me just double check if you can hear me. Good, I'm seeing nods from who I can see on my screen, fellow presenters. Eliot, thanks for your very clear, concise presentation, and also for your efforts through the year and what has been a Herculean task in terms of resuming the wide range of activities that we have been able to offer at Gillespie's over the years. And resuming those took an enormous amount of time and effort, and thanks to the parents who contributed to that. So firstly this evening, thanks to the Parent Council for arranging matters and managing the broadcast this evening. It's approximately 2 years since we first went into lockdown. None of us at that stage had any idea as to how long the lockdown would last or how we would be impacted. Those of us who had a knowledge of history will know a little bit about pandemic of 100 years ago, and there are resemblances in terms of its journey, its trajectory, and how long it took for our own society to get back to some kind of normality. It was around 3 years, I believe. Excuse me. There have been huge challenges during these past 2 years, but our school community has adapted and evolved. Throughout, we've sought to keep the interests of young people at the heart of what we do. I think, reflecting on my almost 40 years in education, I would say the last 2 years have undoubtedly been the toughest. We're having to respond quickly. We didn't have the benefit of consulting. We basically had to go with it, and often we had to change the decision that we'd made that morning, that afternoon. It has been challenging, but we come through it, we learn, we move on, and thank you to everyone for your support. Can I take this opportunity also of thanking all those who have contributed to the Ukraine appeal. When I last checked on Monday, we'd raised just over £2,000. And that appeal, coordinated by our Right Respecting Schools group, I think has helped to galvanise a bit of community spirit across the school. And the wearing of blue and yellow on the Friday, it was lovely. It was one youngster who wore one blue shoe and one yellow shoe. I really liked that. I thought it was lovely. My yellow tie and my blue suit paled into insignificance. I thought that was really nice, and I found that really inspiring to see so many of our youngsters give that public display of support. Currently then in school, we are busy preparing for our SQA exams. That is the plan, that they will go ahead as normal. And it's very much as all systems go for that to happen. I'm pleased that we were able to run a full diet of prelims this year through January. That gave us a dry run. It gave us an opportunity to practice the whole operation. And that's important, not just for the pupils and the staff, but also for the invigilators who come in. For many hadn't been in school for 2 years, so they were unfamiliar with it. And as the school grows and we use more and more rooms, it is quite a complex operation to coordinate all of that. And my thanks to Bob Shankland for coordinating that in its entirety. Currently then, it's all systems go as far as I'm concerned in terms of recruitment. As the school grows, so does our number of staff. And with Darragh coming on available to us as an annex from August this year, we're recruiting additional staff for Darragh. We are recruiting somewhere between 25 and 30 new staff, and that's a mix of support staff and teaching staff. So that is a fairly time-consuming and major operation. It's really important that we attract and retain the very best staff if we're going to continue to grow as a school. In terms of the coming weeks, we'll also be setting out priorities for us as a school. There will no doubt be priorities identified for us by both the Scottish Government and City of Edinburgh Council. But it's my role then, working in consultation with the wider community, to contextualise these for our context, and that will be important, as we will have challenges, especially around growth and the annex, to contend with over the coming years, and that will be reflected in what energy and time we can put towards the very demanding and important other areas that people will ask us to have a look at. But we've got to be realistic and focus on ensuring that attainment continues to rise, but also that we do our level best to close the gap, that is the poverty-related attainment gap that is seen as a Scottish priority and one for us at Gillespie. So we've made good progress in that. I'm pleased recently that our positive destinations figure, that is the percentage of school leavers who entered a positive and sustained destination, that figure sits at just shy of 98%, which is an astonishing achievement given the context of the pandemic. So out of 203 leavers, there were 5 youngsters who didn't end up in a positive destination. We know who they are, and we'll continue to work with them and their families to ensure that they get something meaningful and positive to take them into the next stage of their lives. I'm going to say a wee bit about COVID now and how that is, is progressing. You may have had opportunity to read the letter that we sent home earlier today, a letter from Professor Jason Leach. So if you haven't had a chance to read it, it summarises what is planned and some of what's coming our way. It's very much a case now of getting back to normal, a new normal. With some of the things that we've learned and developed over recent years that we may wish to continue with. For example, online parent council meetings, and I see there's a question that's come up on that tonight. It's our plan at Gillespie's then that we will continue with the current mitigations until the Easter holiday. That's the next 2.5 weeks. I'm pleased to say that although generally there's an expectation that face coverings would be relaxed, and they have been relaxed, that where we have kindly and respectfully requested youngsters to continue to wear face coverings in classrooms, they do that. We have got several staff who are clinically vulnerable, and they have asked youngsters if they would mind, if they would continue to wear face coverings. And they do. It's a small number who don't, but it doesn't pose an appreciable risk. Overall, we're at over 80% wearing face coverings in classrooms. The expectation is that in moving around the buildings and common areas that face coverings are worn. And again, I just pay huge tribute to the youngsters, how they've responded to that. I'm out in corridors, most period changeovers, speaking and just reminding youngsters. And usually they're in deep in conversation with a friend or whatever. Hopefully it was about their most recent lesson, but probably other matters of interest. And it needs just a gentle reminder to put their mask on when they're moving around, and they respond very positively and respectfully. So I couldn't praise them highly enough. One of the pre-questions for this evening was asked about how we're expecting school operations to change and back to normal. So thank you for raising that question. It will be gradual. The pattern over the last 2 years has been that the guidelines tend to come from the Scottish Government. They tend to then go through a process with the council, which then feeds to us. So there can be a week or two of a delay in terms of new changes being effected, but that's okay. I'm comfortable with that. Sometimes as a school, we will tend to further contextualize what we do in response and reflecting our own context. Parents may recall that we were the first school in Scotland, indeed the UK, to introduce face coverings whilst moving around the building. And we may well be the last to remove that particular measure, but it's important that we do it safely. What I propose to do is to continue to update you, but I would anticipate writing to all members of the school community a few days before we resume. That would be towards the end of the Easter break. Between now and then, in those 4 weeks, I anticipate there will be further changes. I think it's fair to say you'll have seen from a Friday update that our school community positive cases, they have reached a peak. They've peaked over the last 2 weeks, and it appears to be staying around that number, the high 30s amongst the pupil population. Typically among the staff, it has been 3 or 4 each week. And it's the staff who are absent through being positive or absent also through being close contacts that potentially has the biggest impact on us and our and it impacts on us in terms of our ability to maintain normal service. Sarah has already mentioned what's happening with Gaelic medium education high school, the proposed new high school. And to mention, when the new administration is formed, they'll be taking that forward, and I anticipate there will be consultation then with parents. But in the meantime, as a teacher of the school, the entire community, I'm tasked with ensuring that we offer the highest quality education to all youngsters in our school with the resources that I have at my disposal. And working with the parent council, where I feel sometimes that we maybe need additional resources, we will work with you to raise funds or indeed to persuade the council to make additional resource allocation to us. I'm going to pick up on 2 or 3 other questions that arose in the questions. First of all, the alternative timetable that was raised at the last parent council meeting, where formally reference was made to us, where we ran an alternative timetable for years 1, 2 and 3 during exam leave. We did look at that, but I felt it wasn't feasible to do that. We're still experiencing high levels of staff absence. And given that, there are days when it does feel that we're very operational and not much capacity for further planning. So regrettably, I'm going to say that we have not gone with offering an alternative timetable this year, but would hope to next year. The planning for that usually starts around October, November, with details, etc., going out in December to families, etc. It simply wasn't possible this year, and that's a shame, because I know that we're really keen to offer something that's a bit different to years 1, 2 and 3. There was also a question about mental health and well-being, and at the next parent council meeting, I'd like to invite Mrs. Graham, Nikki Graham, along to that meeting to share a little bit about our plans for addressing and responding to and supporting young people who are presenting with mental health issues. Undoubtedly, that number has grown over the past 2 years. An estimate somewhere maybe in the region of 20% of youngsters presenting with some kind of mental health issue. 2 to 3 years ago, that number almost doubling to 35+%. That would be an initial estimate. So it has grown, and that clearly impacts on them. But we are, and we will be regrouping and thinking how we're going to do that. So Mrs. Graham has been appointed to that position and will be taking up post in the next few weeks, and we'll come and speak to you about that. There's a further question about how we group youngsters in English, particularly in S3, S4. Specifically on that, our classes in English and across the school in S1 and S2 are mixed ability. But what we do is we create smaller groupings where there are youngsters with additional needs, where they will have additional support with more adults in the room. But generally speaking, then it's mixed ability in S1, S2, and then when youngsters move into S3, where they start their 8 national courses, they will tend to be grouped according to National 5, National 4, etc. But we try and keep discrete groups at that point. And I know following me this evening, Ashling Dolan is talking about the maths curriculum, and she may say a wee bit more about how math youngsters are grouped when it comes to maths. A specific question about the debating club. Are there any plans to reinstate it? The answer would be to that, yes. The member of staff who ran the debating club, I'm hoping will be able to resume that as soon as, and it's something I'll be asking in the coming days. There was a question about the running club, and I'll invite my colleague Eliot. Don't recall whether he responded to that or not. If not, I'll respond to that in the chat and the presentation that follows. That in effect concludes my presentation this evening. Thank you to all for your continuing support, and if there are any other questions or aspects that I haven't covered, I'll respond to it in the chat. So at this point, Sarah, can I hand back to you?
You're muted, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you, Donald. Thank you very much for your report. There are a number of questions in the Q&A connected with things which have come up over the last, over Donald's report and Eliot's presentation and what I said at the beginning. So we'll come to those at the end. But next we're going to pass on to Ashling Dolan, who, as Donald just mentioned, is going to give a presentation on the maths curriculum. Ashling is the acting curriculum leader for maths at the moment. So thanks, Laura. If you could pass on to Ashling now.
Sorry, I'm just trying to share my screen. Okay, can everybody see that okay? Cool. So good evening, everyone. So thanks very much for the introduction, Sarah. Yeah, my name is Ashling Dolan, and I'm the acting curriculum leader for mathematics at James Gillespie. So what I'm going to speak to you about tonight is just a few kind of general principles that we have in building our curriculum and how we evaluate our curriculum, and then kind of going forward what we plan for the future as well. So as most of you will be aware, this is kind of our pathway that we have our pathways that we have starting from S1, and then S2, so and then leading on to either National 5 or National 4 Maths, and then I've just got the flow chart here as well. So what's really interesting this year is we've introduced a new course into the senior phase, so higher applications of maths, and that's been really well received. So we've got about 14 pupils taking that this year, and it's given them an extra kind of higher to do, or for some pupils who didn't want to go on and do higher maths, they were able to take higher applications of maths, looking at kind of more finance or spreadsheets or statistics as well. So that would also lead nicely into advanced higher statistics. So we're quite excited about having this new course running this year. And also what we've found out as well is that the more established this course is going to get, the more universities are starting to recognise it. So already Edinburgh University have talked about recognising it as one of their hires that they would look at, for example, in medicine, and hopefully more universities will take that on board as well. So just to say then, starting from S1, sorry, I'm a bit slow with my computer this evening. So for parents, our parents and carers of pupils in S1, you will know that broadly speaking, we do try to place pupils in a class that's where they're with other pupils on a similar journey. So we would use information from the primary school. We would also look at how they've kind of coped with the work in the first few weeks, and we try to give them maybe just a little checkup as well at the start. Now, as Mr. Macdonald was saying, it is broad. It is quite broad how we set, and then we would have probably a smaller class of pupils in what we would call our blue course. But largely speaking, it's relatively mixed, and most pupils will be following the red course. What we tend to do as well, just so that everybody's informed and understand the pathways, and there's always a line of communication as well. So we would send out that information to parents and carers either at the end of August or towards the beginning of September. So our S1 course is something that we've been working on for quite a few years. And we're constantly evaluating it and reviewing it and making little tweaks to it. But we've got a kind of structure that we're pretty happy with at the moment. So we start off with place value, and we've identified place value as being essential to understanding number. So we spend a lot of time at the beginning looking at place value, developing that, extending it by looking at number bases and some exciting things like looking at binary. And I've just popped in a wee resource here as well that you can click on and play on at home. So it's quite a nice website called Exploding Dots, where there's all these different machines. So not something to do at home as well. So then going on, oh, sorry. So a big priority for us is our number and algebra in S1, because we've identified those areas as being really important for success at National 5. So we do establish a way of closing any gaps from primary school, making sure that by the time pupils are going into S2 that they have a good foundation in number and algebra. And then what we're doing as well is we're interleaving those skills in different areas such as area, perimeter, angles. And then into S2, we're looking at revisiting those skills again in terms of ratio, percentages, and looking at more complex equations and trigonometry. And then I've just popped in a few resources here as well. So one thing that we have changed this year is that we've made available on every pupil's team. We've made a big Excel spreadsheet of all our courses and our timelines. So this is really coming from COVID, and we've obviously pupils can be off for a week or 2 weeks. So what they can do is click on their course, and then they're able to see roughly where they should be in class if they were in class, and then there's resources there to kind of keep them up to date. But there also will be further resources on Teams as well that's maybe more specific. Also some kind of core worksheets to help as well. I've just put in that we use Corbett Maths, and then obviously for extension and enrichment we have the Enrich website and UKMT challenges. So these are all things that we use in our lessons to try and support pupils, but also extend and enrich them as well in maths. So a few of our general principles then with the broad general education is we spend a lot of time at departmental meetings discussing resources and best practice, and then that's a really exciting kind of thing for us as well. If somebody's had a really good lesson, then share that, and then we can all go on and try that out with our classes as well. But we also have regular informal discussions at break and lunchtime where we could be sitting around trying to solve a problem. So a lot of our time is spent talking about how we can improve the experience for learners, and by working on maths ourselves, we're able to identify, how people feel when they do get stuck, how we can best intervene without actually ruining a problem. So all of that informs a lot of our discussions at our departmental meetings. So we spend also time thinking about, identifying gaps and how we can then plan as a department. So either providing extra resources or revision sessions in order to kind of close those gaps. We've also been providing information about end of year assessments and revision resources. So trying to keep parents and carers informed as early on as possible when we know our plans. Obviously, the last few years we have been trying to adapt and work towards whatever new information is coming out or whatever new situation that we're faced with. But this year we've been trying to be proactive and email out resources prior to assessments in order to give pupils as much time as possible to plan preparation for an upcoming test, but also maybe have a little bit more targeted revision for them as well. So in our lessons then, we try to provide opportunities for group work and discussions, and recently, it's been great to see that kind of happening more and more, and that's something that we tried to emulate online, but it's not always as easy. You don't get the same buzz that you do in the classroom. So it's been lovely walking around the department again and being able to see pupils discussing and working on problems together and enjoying maths together. One of the other things we have is we value working on a single problem, say, but looking at different ways of approaching it and not necessarily racing through a load of questions. We also aim to provide suitable extension, so we spend a lot of time, and thanks to the Parent Council as well, I've been able to get some books that we're going to try and build up a maths library for pupils to read a little bit extra on maths or to do some extra puzzles or problem solving. And then we also have a lot of low stakes quizzes to try and give learners regular feedback, but also give them clear next steps. So for the next week, they know they just have to work on this problem. And then if it comes up in a quiz again, they can see how they can tackle it. And then our enrichment things that we have going as well, we still have lots of pupils taking part in the Scottish and the national maths competitions. Entering team competitions, unfortunately, COVID's kind of put a bit of a stop to that. But I'm really hopeful that that can get back up and running again. And we send out information on the master classes and the math circles at the University of Edinburgh. And then there's the Tuesday Lunchtime Maths Club that's been running for quite a few years as well. Then just going into S3 and S4. So learners will be starting to prepare for their National 5 national formats. And again, our focus on this is going to be on the algebraic skills in S3, because we've identified these skills as being essential for success at National 5, and there's quite a chunk of the National 5 course is algebraic skills such as linear and quadratics. So we also do quite a lot of low stakes testing, as I said before. We continue that into S3, and that kind of helps learners as well prepare for end of topic tests or an end of year test. And then we're trying to encourage pupils as much as possible to use these assessments or use any feedback to inform their learning and do some independent learning at home using the resources we've provided, but also to seek support as early as possible. And we do have a specific S3 revision session running as well. And then we're aiming to gather evidence for national formats that fits in nicely with different parts of the course, and also National 5 numeracy for pupils going on taking National 5 maths. So effectively to be backed up with those courses. So I've also put up here about S5, S6, but I'm not going to go into I'm not going to go into too much detail on these courses as they are well established, apart from the higher applications of maths, which is new. But all the course specifications are there, so you can have a read of those if you're interested. Of course, if there is any questions, please just do email me about a specific course as well. Here's some of our support sessions that we have available. We've been running these throughout the year, so this would have been emailed out to all parent and carers as well. But as you can see, we have a vast range of either specific revision sessions or ones for all levels. And a huge thanks, we've got some S6 pupils who've been helping out since the start of the year, coming every single Monday, and they've been a huge support to us as well. We also have additional staff in the department who've been helping out team teaching with S4 to try and ensure pupils are getting the best qualification, so particularly to help with gaps in learning from COVID. A few of the positives then that we've had this year so far. So the feedback from sharing these course documents at the start of the term has been really, really positive. And we're aiming to embed this in a sustainable way going forward. So providing detailed feedback and targeted revision. So after an assessment, we've been going through a reflection sheet with pupils, and then we've also, for prelims, we've given very clear next steps. So for example, if they got question 1 wrong, we would recommend 5 or 6 similar questions to that question that they could go away and practice, and maybe do a few questions a week, so they can kind of chunk it up. The numbers of pupils taking maths into the senior phase continues to grow, and that's really encouraging to see. And we still have a really good uptake in competitions, and pupils are reaching very high levels in these competitions. So for example, this year we had 2 senior pupils do the Olympiad paper, and last week we just had 3 intermediate pupils do the kangaroo paper as well. And prior to COVID, we did win the National Enterprising Maths 2 years in a row, and I was pretty convinced it would be 3, but the pandemic did kind of hamper that a bit. And an exciting thing that we're working on as a department for August is that we're going to produce an S1 parent handbook, so that parents and carers at home can work with their pupil on maybe a specific topic or skill in S1, and see how it's taught in class. And within the booklet, we're going to have links to resources and videos as well. So it's something that you could all work on at home, or we can use it to inform our teaching as well. So we're hoping it'll be a booklet that will provide information and insight into the S1 course for parents and carers, but also something that the pupils can have at the start of the year as well. So I think that's it from me. So I'll just pass back over. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ashling, for your presentation. Just to confirm to parents, so along with the recording for this meeting, we'll also get a copy of Ashling's presentation, and we'll put that on the Parent Council website. So all that information and the links and whatever which are in it will be available at that point. I think we're now moving on to the Q&A. Subject to anything that Donald or anybody else here would like to say about it. I think maybe the easiest thing, because there'll be questions for both Donald and Ashling and for Eliot, and indeed for the Parent Council, is I'll maybe just run through them, and then we can, whoever's the most appropriate person can pick them up. We hopefully might be able to get through them all, depending on whether lots more appear. And just to start off, there was a question about the ski trip for next year, which was actually, I think, one which was raised before the meeting. And I know that speaking to Donald before now that he was intending to answer it, so it probably just fell off the list. Donald, would you be able to answer that question now? And if you see that in the Q&A about whether there'll be a ski trip next year.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, that did slip off. It was in my list of questions to answer. The position on that is that we are hoping to. When I contacted the council team that gives the green light for such trips, that was around 2 weeks ago. At that stage, they were saying no, not at this stage, whilst anticipating that Scottish Government guidelines would evolve. And as soon as it evolves sufficiently to allow us to do that, we'll try and get that information out. Challenge we have is that the later we leave it, the longer it will take for, or the less time we have for families to pay by instalments. So I'm hoping that it will. And there was a previous question about which year groups. It would likely be years 1, 2, and 3. Likely be, but details to be confirmed as and when we get more guidelines updated in regard to foreign trips in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald. I'm going to approach the questions now in the way that Donald has approached them in the past, so starting with those which have had the most likes. So first of all, a comment saying, can we keep the online option for these meetings, please? On the assumption that these meetings means the Parent Council meetings, yes. I don't know if parents will remember, but last summer we did do a survey of parents and asked, amongst other things, about Parent Council meetings in the future, and the favoured response was, I think, a kind of mixture of online and in-person meetings. There are different advantages to both. Obviously, we can record these meetings so people can catch up with them if they miss them on the night, or we can revisit things like, you know, Ashling's presentation on maths. Lots more people can attend than would normally attend at the school. On the other hand, it's more difficult to be interactive, you know, and answer, you know, to get a real debate or conversation going, and also things like, you know, getting people to volunteer for things, or sort of discussing the best way of taking things forward in a Parent Council, you know, for Parent Council activities, I think it's more difficult when it's done online. So I suspect we'll be looking at something hybrid, and we'll be looking at that over the next few weeks and months once we have the option of having meetings online, not just online, but in person as well. The next question on that basis is, when will we know Children First building availability? What is Plan B? What implications will this have on S5, S6 education for rising rules over the next 3 years? Remote online learning has been suggested in the past by the council. How can we prevent this from happening? So I'll probably just pass that one on to Donald, I think, in the first instance. But obviously, these are issues of great, you know, interest and concern to the Parent Council as well.
Thanks, Sarah. So in regard to Children First availability, I will find out what the definitive answer to that is, whether it's going to be available from August in the event that there was to be a further delay to us being able to access data, which the most recent news I heard on that was that it would be available from around mid-July. Therefore, the contingency would very much be using Children First. We currently have access to the ground floor there, and it allows us to manage that. And there's a second part to that question in regard to online learning. What I would say on that is that I do think that online learning will have a part to play going forward, regardless of the accommodation arrangements. I think technology can support learning. I would readily acknowledge that I think face-to-face in school is what we would prefer. But I also know from speaking to youngsters, including my own daughters who have gone on to university, that we also need to prepare them for a world that is increasingly digital and online. So we will keep those options open, and let's have a look at what we have learned and what works better and what works well. And I think a mix of different ways of learning in the coming years is what we'll look at. But can I just emphasize that first and foremost, we need to have the accommodation for all the youngsters, and that should be the default position. Anything else should be supplementary and should be by way of enrichment rather than replacing. And I'm firmly with the questioner on that. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Donald. Going back to the Q&A, we have a comment: can we retain the online format for routine parent-teacher meetings, please? It really saves time, gives each parent the time they booked without others hogging, and may also offer an opportunity, or could there also be an opportunity for longer follow-ups on a separate night for those with more detailed requirements? I'm sure that Donald will note that comment, and as do we. Can I encourage the person who wrote this to fill in the survey when we send it out, so we get those kind of views, which will be really useful for gauging the views of the parents overall. And also on the issue of feedback, whilst we've been preparing this questionnaire, we have been in contact with the school, including Donald and Bob Shankland, and the way that feedback works is also an issue which is being discussed. So we might be looking at doing a more specific question or survey on that, following the one about in-person and not in-person meetings. It was looking a little unwieldy to put them all in together, and requires more work, but that's something we'll also be looking at in the future, hopefully. The next question is on maths. My daughter's S1 tracking report recommended she regularly read the maths diary entries on Teams to ensure retention. I don't think this recognises her age in terms of self-directed learning. Can the school not simply provide a worksheet to practice at home each week? Otherwise, as a parent, I'm going to need to look at Teams with her and find example questions online to find useful tasks. I'm sure you can all see that question on the Q&A. Could I pass that one over to Ashling, as she is our maths person for this evening?
Hi, thank you very much. Yeah, so maths diaries is something that some teachers use to help pupils after they've had their lesson to read back over and reflect on their learning. And we found that they're quite effective. Now, I totally understand that you want something just to go over. So there is lots of worksheets, and as I said, that website that I've linked in the presentation as well, the Corbett Maths website's quite good for just going through very specific topics and then given a worksheet. And then there's also a QR code where you can watch a video and you can get the answers. But if there is any concerns at all about accessing work or knowing exactly what your daughter's next steps are, please do send me an email and I can speak to you individually about how we can support you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashling. I think the next question is also about maths, so it'll be back to you. When maths tests have been set, there has been limited feedback to the students or carers as to where things need improvement. Is the policy not to share test papers for further review at home? Thanks.
Thank you. So as I said, we do provide quite detailed feedback in class, so pupils are given a reflection sheet. They would go through each question that they either got right or got wrong, and then they would go through the answers with the teacher. We don't give out the test papers because we do use them year on year, and specifically things like prelims we can't really give out because we need to use them as evidence to build estimates and things like that. So we do have a policy of not giving out the papers. However, you know, the pupils are always allowed to come in at any point, look at their paper again. So we wouldn't stop anybody who wanted to look at their test papers again. And we do, as I said, provide the extra feedback in terms of similar questions to what was actually in the prelim. But again, if there is a situation where you're unsure about what your child's next steps are, or any concerns at all, please do send me an email and I can help you with that specific case.
Thank you again, Ashling. We now have a question about the SQA exam diets. What happens if a pupil tests positive for COVID and has to isolate missing an exam in May? Is there a chance to sit a similar paper once back in school, or is it down to teachers having to appeal with evidence, i.e. class test, prelims, etc. for their final grade, asking for higher place? Before I pass on to Donald, I should say we raised that specific issue. I raised that specific issue with the council officer dealing with this at the CCWP meeting. And one of the difficulties they had at that point is we don't actually know what the COVID policy is going to be about isolation by May. It may all have changed. Maybe people won't be required to isolate, and they were going to take that back to the SQA. But perhaps Donald will have more information on that now. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. So specifically for that one, we will every year, whether COVID is here or not, we will have youngsters who are unable to sit the final paper through as a result of illness or sometimes other family reasons. In that situation, what we do is we would provide the evidence that we have to basically back up the estimate grades that we will already have submitted. We're fortunate this year in that we've run a full diet of prelims, which as far as possible replicates the final exam. I know I've been working on exam related matters with the SQA for many years, and I do know that a prelim exam which is taken as close to the final exam as possible, which covers as much of the course as possible, and which is taken under exam conditions, has the highest likelihood of gaining a successful appeal. So whether it be COVID or any other reason, we would be using prelim evidence and also class test material. There are another subject areas where they've, for example, in English, where they've been developing folio materials that could also be used. So it tends to be a range of evidence that's used, and the particular evidence will vary from one subject to another. But generally speaking, the prelim is the one that would be most important. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald. Now moving on to a question for the Parent Council, so I'll answer that one. I very much appreciate the Parent Council stance that once elections are over, it will be arguing hard on the issue of rising school roll to be tackled. I'm also relieved the PC will be pushing for the Council to provide sufficient accommodation for the whole school until the dedicated GME school has been built. However, could you also please push for some hard deadlines to be put in place around this? The Council has been kicking this issue around for literally years now, and we are no further forward. It is damaging the student experience for all pupils and is not good enough. I'm desperate to see some progress here. Yeah, I really appreciate this parents' point of view. I think we would all like things to be clearer, and everybody wants to know that there's enough accommodation in place, that everybody has a space at the school, and that the plans that the council has been putting in place for a GME high school are sorted out, because that is to the benefit of everybody, and that is the project going forward. The difficulty has been, I think, well, one of the things has been that the council has yet to get clarity from the Scottish Government about an intervention it made last year about the nature of the GME High School in Edinburgh as being standalone and centrally located, and trying to pin down what the Scottish Government actually means by that, what kind of site that might mean, and whether the Scottish Government would be prepared to provide any funding to support that kind of thing. And that has been hard, I think, for the Council to really get clarity from the Scottish Government about that. And whilst that is up in the air, it's quite difficult for them to take it forward. I think also another issue is with the statutory consultation process itself. I think sometimes we feel that maybe the Council could just decide something and do it. However, to do what the Council is proposing to do, which is to shut down the GME element of education at Gillespie's and move it to another site, just as if they had decided to close down the English medium element and move it to another site, requires a statutory consultation process which is set out in law, which is not as simple as all that, and where there are a lot of things that can go wrong if it's not clear to everybody that this is going to be the right way forward. So on the site, until they have the site sorted out, they can't take the statutory consultation process forward. They have to be clear that there are educational benefits to the proposal, and they have to be able to demonstrate that, and they have to be able to demonstrate that also to the satisfaction of the inspectorate, who will also have to put a report forward on the basis of the consultation. In the worst set of circumstances, if a consultation doesn't go well and there's pushback from parents on what is being proposed, or there are some other flaw in the consultation process, it might not be possible to take it forward, or even the Scottish Government might call it in. And in the cases of failed statutory consultations, it's ultimately possible where you could end up with a really damaging situation where another proposal couldn't be put forward for another 5 years, and nobody wants that. So that is one of the difficulties that the Council is dealing with. But I couldn't agree more. It has been kicking around for a long time. This is the plan. The Council has known it's the plan, and it's its job to make sure that the educational benefits for the GME High School are demonstrated, including funding, staff who will be the core of the new school, and making sure that that is not to the detriment of funding for the English medium staff who are also at Gillespie's, which has been an issue we've been raising with the Council. And to ultimately, it's the Council's job to pin down the site and to deal with that. So yes, I totally agree with that particular point. Sorry, that was a very long response. There's a couple of maths points coming up now. So one for Ashling Dolan is basically, can we just note her enthusiasm for our subject is obvious and infectious to the children. Thank you to her. I'll not ask her to comment on that. However, there is another question. In view of several anxious and disappointed youngsters and concerned parents, could we ask how this year's higher maths prelim results and class test results compare to previous years? And there's another question after that, so I'll just add that in just now. Is there an end of year maths test to come for S2? They've just had their maths assessment in early March. So if I could run those two together. Thanks, Ashling.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Yes, so obviously we appreciate the anxieties of pupils and parents at this time, particularly coming up to assessments and given the last few years. In terms of prelims from previous years, it's very hard because of the different topics that would be in the prelims this year and the ones that have been taken out to actually analyse exactly how that works year on year. And we haven't finished doing all our tests for higher yet. So it's not an analysis that I would have an answer for just right now, but we haven't noticed anything that would alarm us in terms of the prelim results from this year as opposed to prior to COVID. But that's not a definitive answer to your question, I'm afraid, just yet. If there is any serious concerns or anxiety about what's coming up in the SQA assessments, or pupils aren't aware exactly what kind of things that they can leave out, just please get them to speak to their teacher, or again, you're more than welcome to email me and I can talk you through, because they have taken out quite a lot of things in the higher, so that kind of brings down the level of revision that needs to be done as well, so you can be quite targeted. In terms of the S2 test, so the test that just happened, that's what we were calling our end of year test for S2 before we go on to do trigonometry. So we will be teaching similarity and trigonometry after that, but we don't plan to have another test for S2.
Thank you, Ashling. But don't go away because it's maths again in the questions. So there's another thank you for being a positive, encouraging maths teacher to our son in his S1 and S2 years. And 2 questions. Many parents I know have resorted to private tutors to support their child or children through maths, higher in particular. Is there any thoughts on how to take that into account when teachers reflect on their own teaching and pupil learning? And a question about the Maths Lunchtime Club. Is that for young people with a love of maths, or is it to consolidate learning? Should I be encouraging my child to attend? So Ashling, back to you.
Thank you. I'll take the lunchtime one first. Yes, so the lunchtime club is, it's a maths club. It's not a homework club and it's not a revision session. So it's an opportunity for pupils, probably usually S1 to S3, but any year group can come along to socialise, eat their lunch and kind of talk about puzzles and problems. And it's just lovely because I think I see the S6s now who were the people I created the maths club for back when they were in S1, and I still see them hanging around together and talking about maths. So, you know, it's definitely something you can be encouraging your pupil to come along to. In terms of the tutors, tutors is always something that we've been aware of, and this is long before COVID, pupils have had tutors. So we would always be very happy to find out if there's anything we can provide to support them. But you know, obviously we do have a lot of additional revision sessions, which essentially would be tutoring if they come after school or during lunchtime. So that's something that I would recommend in the first instance, rather than resorting to a private tutor. Come and speak to the teacher and find out what resources are available within the school, and then we can go from there. But if there is a situation where somebody does have a tutor and they need feedback on what to actually target, then that's something that we can provide. And as I say, these reflection sheets that pupils will have after a prelim, and the additional resources, the kind of post-prelim revision we've given, means that a tutor could work through that PDF with your child and then actually work out what questions are in it. But in the first instance, you should be coming to the teacher and going to any additional revision sessions or lunchtime clubs to support. Okay, thank you.
Thank you again, Ashling. Now we have a question for Donald. Well, it says, this is not a question but a comment. The current stance of JGHS on face coverings is not in line with Scottish Government guidance, which states that high school pupils and staff will not be required to wear face coverings after the school midterm break. Mr. Macdonald said that JGHS staff would say that students have the option to not wear a face covering. This is inconsistent messaging at best, and at worst, undue pressure on those who don't want to wear a face mask. Donald, could I pass that on to you? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I'm going to respectfully disagree with the parent or the person who wrote that. I think that and I believe that our stance is entirely consistent with Scottish Government and Council guidelines. I just wanted to add to that when there's been mixed messages, I think some of the messages that we pick up in the media, what's happening in England and what happens in Scotland, and I think that has led to some confusion as to what is guideline, what is a rule, and what isn't. There was a challenge for us as a school year. First of all, the main challenge was to keep the school open and fully functioning. And I don't want to jinx it, but we've been able to do that. You may be aware some schools in Edinburgh haven't. They've had infection rates which have led to partial school closures in Edinburgh. We haven't had that. When I met with group of staff, that includes their support staff, teaching staff, and also our pupil voice leaders in the week prior to the 28th of February. I asked them what they would like our school position to be. The strongest message came from the pupil voice leaders, where they felt that a message that in any way, if you like, encouraged people not to wear masks would be counterproductive. And in particular, they felt that staff who were clinically vulnerable, they didn't want to lose them. They wanted to retain their teachers, particularly the seniors in the lead up to exams, and I applaud them for that. But the one that probably struck biggest chord with me was when they talked about youngsters or pupils who are vulnerable and how they would cope and how they would identify themselves as being vulnerable. And that was a real challenge and is a challenge. There are pupils who don't want to say to other pupils that I'm vulnerable, please wear a mask when you're around me. So in my messaging, what I've said is that the option is there not to wear a mask, but we would encourage you to wear a mask and to be respectful of others. I make a ton of announcement every Monday on the PA system, and that's the message that I give. But rest assured that if a youngster chooses not to wear a face covering, they're perfectly entitled to do that. And that's, in my book, is consistent with Scottish Government guidelines. I do appreciate just a final comment that face coverings has been a contentious issue through the pandemic, not necessarily in James Gillespie's. We've been very fortunate to have the support of the community, but it has been up and down the country, and it's one we're not going to win hearts and minds entirely on it. I'm pleased to say that we've done pretty well. I know the stats in the other schools, and I think we've kept infections low, and I'm determined that we will keep them as low as we can. And if that means, in the words of our pupil voice leaders, that means that there's a bit of discomfort with wearing face coverings for a little bit longer, let's do that to look after our more vulnerable members of the school community. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Donald. I think another question for you now. It has been a little disappointing that the parents of students who are leaving this year have not had the opportunity to fully discuss what help their sons and daughters might need prior to the exams. A 5-minute slot online sadly is nowhere long enough. After all, they've had a pretty raw deal with the pandemic. Now, if parents want further information, they have to get in touch with the school, which is not always that straightforward in my experience. Could I pass that back to you, Donald? Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. We do have 5-minute slots, and I do appreciate, having recently had my own kids go through the school, that there are times when you'd like to have longer with particular teachers. Of course, if you make them longer, there are then fewer slots available. If you make them shorter, there'll be more slots, but parents get a bit less time with the teachers. And I think this year I want to acknowledge that there is an increased anxiety and an increased need for that discussion with teachers. And I'm sorry that I wasn't able to change that. There are contractual obligations that I have to fulfill in terms of how that operates with teacher contracts. What I would say is that we are looking this year to increase the amount of time that we would have available for the online consultation with parents, so it may go some way to addressing that issue. It wasn't possible to do that this year, and that's a regret. I'd like to have had more time for people. But going forward, I would hope that time available will increase, and we will reduce then the time that teachers will spend on other aspects out with direct contact with pupils. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Donald. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we certainly hope that we might be able to run a survey on feedback and the general issues surrounding feedback, including parent consultations and the reports to parents on progress and different ways that might be managed. If we can sort that out, I hope that will be useful to parents to give their views to the school, so that we can look at planning for the future. It's now nearly 8:20. I think whatever happens, I hope we will finish the questions, but if we don't, I think we'll finish at 8:30, and we will, as I've mentioned earlier, deal with all of the questions, including any that might not have been answered in our Q&A. But moving swiftly onwards, some teachers have provided access to recent National 5 past papers, but without answers. Is it possible to access answers, or is this something we need to purchase separately? Does that exist? Could I ask one of the teachers here if they know, Donald or Ashling?
I'm happy to take this one if you like. Yeah. Hi, yeah, so all the SQA past papers are available online, either through the SQA website There's also a very good website called Dynamic Maths, so you can literally search the year that you want, or you can search by topic, and then on the right hand side it gives you the mark scheme, so it gives you the question and the mark scheme. So you shouldn't have to purchase any any mark schemes for any of the National 5, particularly maths anyway. I don't know about other subjects, but it should all be online. And again, I'm more than happy to direct you to this if you want to send me an email about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashling. I don't know if Donald has anything else to add to that. I suppose that there's a difference between maths and other types of subjects where if you're asked to write an essay in English, then clearly there's not a standard answer to that or a right answer. There are different ways of doing that. But unless Donald has anything else to add, I'll move on to the next one, which is, will there be an opportunity to provide feedback on the recent S5 Parents' Evening? While I appreciate that there will be other views, our experience was very unsatisfactory. One major issue was that despite one teacher teaching 2 subjects, we were only able to book one 5-minute slot to discuss both. So Donald, could I pass that question on to you? Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Again, it's following on from the answer I gave earlier in terms of the time that is available over the course of an evening. I'm not quite sure why that happened, why a teacher teaching 2 subjects, the parent concerned was only able to book one 5-minute slot to discuss both. That seems unfair. That doesn't seem right. So if I could ask that parent to contact me, I can ensure that doesn't happen. That just doesn't make sense at all for that. That would seem to be a parent penalised in terms of the opportunity to discuss it. So my immediate reaction is that that shouldn't have happened, but contact me and we'll ensure that we address that as part of going forward. I do know in the past that Bob Shankland, who oversees parent evenings, generally does ask for feedback, and we take that feedback on board and tweak it within the parameters of the software that we are using. But please, I invite anyone there is specific feedback. And I do know that it seems to be the majority of parents do like the online version as opposed to the face-to-face. But any kind of feedback that you'd wish to offer, please email us directly and we'll be sure to feed it in, because it's a system that continually evolves, and we'll be working with the Parent Council and looking at the feedback we received from the survey that you will receive soon, so we can try and get as many people to get their views incorporated as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald. And we have another question, which I think is for you. In light of increasing fuel costs, can I ask if these are paid centrally by the council or whether they come out of each school's budget?
Yeah, fuel costs are not a devolved cost. They are carried centrally. So although they're not come out of the budget that I oversee, they will come out of a council budget. So I have no doubt it will impact on parents in a different way. But to reassure you, it doesn't come out of our learning and teaching budget as a school.
Thank you, Donald, for confirming that. Now, another question about maths. This is for Ashling. Are you sure that streaming in, for example, maths is a good thing? Some countries that have excellent results in PISA use no streaming whatsoever. That is, they do not divide up pupils according to the perceived ability. Everybody is taught together with some individual or smaller group support for weaker pupils, but still the exact same curriculum for everything. I don't think what we actually have is exactly streaming, but maybe, Ashling, you'd like to take that forward.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. That's an excellent question, and it's always something that's kind of in the back of our minds. So what we have isn't, yeah, as you say, Sarah, it wouldn't be streaming. We're taking the majority of pupils to be following the red course, and then any pupil that we see that has significant gaps to be following a different course. To provide them with the best opportunity to be able to access the material. So yeah, I would say what we do is definitely not streaming, but there is a lot of ongoing research, and there's a lot of conflicting research about mixed ability versus setting, and in all particular contexts as well, it's very different. So what might work in one country might not necessarily work in another country, and what we have at the minute, based on the information that we have, is the best thing for our context and what we found to be the most effective. But it is always something that I'm reading about, that I'm really interested in, and providing the best opportunities for the learners. So thank you for that question.
Thank you very much for Ashling. Now, having had a quick flick through the questions, I think everything has been answered one way or another, apart from this last one, which is for Eliot. And for me, I think, could Eliot apply to the Parent Council for some of this funding? Jean would say in the first instance, well, yes, Eliot could apply to the Parent Council some of this funding. There are difficulties with that, though, although the Parent Council obviously be very keen to support something like after schools, active schools. For providing support to the school is, in the order of £6,000 or £7,000 a year, in maybe an average year, depending on how much we raise, and we provide funding for lots of different small projects through the small sums awards through that. The kind of budget that Eliot is looking at, and I'll ask Eliot to comment in a minute, is thousands per term. So it's a difficult thing to support through the Parent Council like that. I do know, because we've had discussions about this over a long period now for months and months, that there are other parent councils who haven't been able to set up a model like this, which does really rely on a certain amount of confidence that parents will be able to support through donations, a plan like this. In other places, the parent councils are providing sometimes thousands of pounds of support for active schools, and that means that other things just don't get funded at all, which, particularly at the moment when it's difficult to raise funds because we don't have events in the same way we used to have in the past. It creates difficulties for them, and it's created some friction with the council that this has been the effect for them of some of their models. I mean, again, I'll ask Eliot to comment, but having looked at and been at a number of meetings where actions has been discussed, we are doing really well here in terms of the number of clubs that are being run. I'm not sure if we're the best in Edinburgh, but we're certainly near the top if we're not, and that is down to all the work that's been done behind the scenes by Eliot, by staff at the school, both PE staff, Donald, and the office staff, and our business manager, Laura Black, because it's actually quite a big bit of work to get this stuff up and running. So if I can pass that on to Eliot for any comments he might have, and also if he knows exactly where we are at the moment with regard to funding of active schools at Gillespie's for this term.
Yeah, thanks very much, Sarah. I'm conscious of time, 3 minutes to past, so I'll try not to bang on too much. I suppose the key message from me is, apologies for the coughing, not COVID, I hope. I suppose the key message from me is the donation system. It is a new thing we're trialling this year, and it's a way to try and deal with the change and the fact that Sports Scotland don't want active schools to charge parents directly, and it has been a challenge and it has been a trial. The expenses of running an extracurricular programme, which without blowing our trumpet too much, is the biggest in the city, does inevitably mean that if we aren't able to have enough volunteers to run the 39-40 clubs a week that we run, then we do have to pay coaches. And when we have success, it's wonderful that we do have success, but it means that we go further in competitions, so we have to pay more referee fees, more transport costs, and I guess that was what I was kind of trying to highlight tonight. So in an expensive year, you're looking at a programme cost of £10,000, and so relying on parent donations for that, it does really rely on those donations coming in either in a big lump sum at the start of the year or in dribs and drabs throughout the year, and it has been a challenge. And at the moment, off the top of my head, we're looking at approximately minus 3,000 projected by the end of the school year, and we've not at any stage really been in the black. So it has been a challenge, and I'm going to be having a chat with Laura Black and Mr. Macdonald, who have both been fantastically supportive, as have the Parent Council, and we'll look at the best way forward for the coming academic session. But I guess just to reiterate, if your child has participated on a weekly basis and has competed a lot, then we'd be really grateful if you're able to contribute to a level that reflects their involvement. And it's 8:29, so I'm going to shut up. Thank you.
I just say it looks like Sarah's camera has frozen.
Maybe
Yeah.
better that way, who knows, Donald.
Aha, you're back. I'll leave you to close the meeting, Sarah.
Thank you very much. So I could just turn the picture off altogether. The words, I'm sure, are enough. I just want to finish the meeting up, thanking Eliot and Ashling for their presentations and Donald's finished report, and all of them for answering the Q&A questions. Thank you also to everyone attending and for your questions tonight, and for those which were raised in advance. As I mentioned before, the questions will be captured and posted on our website with answers once that can be prepared after the meeting. Our next meeting will be on Tuesday, the 17th of May. We will let you have more details about what is planned for that meeting after Easter. As always, please raise any issues or make any suggestions via the Parent Council email address, jghscouncilcomms@gmail.com, and please take a look at our website for further information on our work. That's jghsparentcouncil.org. Or you can reach it via the Parent tab on the school's website. We post regularly on different issues that we'd like to bring to parents' attention, so please take a look. I look forward to joining you all next time, and in the meantime, I hope you have a great Easter holiday. So thank you and good night.